What's up everyone? It's been a while and I feel like talking about cars again. This, as you've probably caught on by now, is the brand new Toyota GR86. And in today's video, I'm gonna walk you through this car specs, but more importantly, I want to tell you what I think is the biggest drawback that this car has to offer. And unfortunately, none of these out-of-touch car journalists that have tested the car so far have been able to point out. So let's get into it. Now, right off the bat, I think the design of this car is definitely not a downside. Just look at it. It's a really good mix of really pretty car design, especially at the front, and really aggressive one. Look at this. Look at these side skirts that continue into the front vents of the car. Real vents, I must point out, because this is not the norm nowadays. It's all fake vents. And the back especially is really aggressive in my opinion, pretty much like the old car was. Look at that, those two huge tailpipes. Not a big diffuser anywhere in sight, but yeah, the two tailpipes make up for it. And again, from the side, just look how pretty it is. I love the design of this car so much. Look at this from the side. I think it's quite pretty, don't you? Now, there's not a lot of big changes to this car's philosophy from the old one. You still have a front engine, you still have rear-wheel drive, you still have a 2+2 seat configuration, although the back seats are pretty useless in this case. If you want to carry people for luggages, they're great. But overall, I don't think Toyota wanted to tamper too much with a winning formula, which was the old car, and I'm really glad they went that route. I assume a lot of you would probably be expecting me to say that the interior of the GR86 is its biggest drawback, but that's not the case. It's really nice in here. Materials are pretty good, obviously. Leather steering wheel. You've got some soft materials on the dash over here. Alcantara over here. On the seats, of course, on the central part of the seats. Some leather on the side. You've even got Alcantara here, which is nice. Some leather cushions over here. Storage compartments. Bigger storage compartment. It's a pretty nice place to be in, I'm not gonna lie. Proper handbrake, you know what that's for. You've got a digital dash, fully digital dash. This is how it looks when it's in track mode. Give me a sec. Right, it changes the dials a little bit. This is the new infotainment system. It's pretty easy to use. You've got Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, pretty much everything you'd like in a car. Some big buttons for the climate control, the start stop button, the gear lever, which is very well positioned. Back seats, like I said, completely unusable for humans, but really good for extra luggage space. The interior is quite nice, and it's definitely not the biggest downside of this car. It's not actually a downside of this car at all. For me, it feels like a really good upgrade compared to the old car. It's not the way this car drives either, that's for sure. Toyota has kept the same recipe as the old GT86, meaning front engine, rear wheel drive, manual. You also have an automatic as an option, but please don't. If you buy a car like this, just don't buy the automatic, please, okay? But they also kept one of the key elements that made the old car so much fun to drive, which is, surprisingly to most, the actual width of the tires. This car has 18-inch wheels, but they are really narrow, so Toyota fitted two 15-width tires, both on the front and on the back. And especially in weather like this, the biggest challenge is to keep this car going in a straight line. So yeah, at first I wasn't very sure if I picked the right moment to test this car out and see how it drives, but yeah, after driving it for a few days, I feel quite the opposite now. I think this is the perfect time to test a GR86 because you can do 30 kilometers an hour and have lots of fun in this car. Now, the biggest problem of this car, which we'll get to later on in this video, is definitely not the gearbox. It is one of the best manual transmissions I've ever driven. It's got short throws, it's really precise, and the car manufacturers that do bother to put out manual transmission cars, they really tend to work quite a lot on setting them up, and it really shows in the GR86. A couple of small niggles, maybe the gearing is too long. Not a lot of reviewers mention that, although they really like to get into the manual transmission of the Cayman. This is pretty much the same. You can go to 90-95 kilometers per hour in second gear, no problem. And the clutch bite point is a bit high for my taste, but just a couple of minor observations on my side. The engine, you've guessed it, it's also not one of this car's downsides. Definitely not. Toyota made a huge improvement with this one, at least from where I'm sitting. It feels like a big improvement. They've kept the 4-cylinder engine but increased the capacity to 2.5 liters and therefore increased the torque, which I think was one of the main issues of the previous car. And you can definitely feel that even below 3000 RPM, which is quite surprising. The car pulls very well, the engine is very responsive, it's just a blast to drive. I know it only has 230 horsepower, and in 2023 that's not a lot, but in a car that's this light, it's enough, trust me. So now let's finally talk about the elephant in the room, which is the biggest drawback that this car has. And in my opinion, that is the price. So why am I saying that the price is the biggest downside of this car, even though the entire journalistic car world kind of said that this is an affordable sports car? Well, in Sweden at least, with this paint job, the car costs around 38,000 euros. There's no real options to add to the car other than the color, so this is what you get, at least in Sweden. And for me, 38,000 euros is not what I would call affordable. I'm not saying it's an expensive car, because it definitely isn't. It's actually cheaper than the, and I'm going to be controversial here, highly overrated Yaris GR, and it is cheaper even than a Golf GTI, which is saying something. So at this point you're probably wondering, what else would you buy for that amount of money that gives you the same fun sensation as a GR86? Well, I have a couple of cars in mind actually. The first one is the Ford Fiesta ST, and the second one is the Hyundai i20N. Both of those cars are around 8,000 euros cheaper in Sweden than this car. They are more practical because they actually have usable seats in the back, and in my opinion those two cars offer the best experience for the money. They're not exactly sports cars, but they are really fun to drive and quite practical if you plan to daily drive those two cars. Whereas this car, in this sort of weather, it's not really daily driver material, I'll tell you that much. So what am I saying? Don't buy this car, it's overpriced. Don't buy it, it's not that great. No, quite the opposite. You should definitely consider a GR86 if you're in search for a, let's face it, two-seater sports car. I think Toyota did it once again. It's produced a proper enthusiast car, and yeah, we can just applaud them for that, especially in times that we're living today, where most of these cars are going away, not coming back.